Morning. Well, this morning I've got a really beautiful message from Our Lady about the Pope. A message I think we really should all take to heart about praying for him and especially about not criticizing. Here goes. My children, how much so very many of you hurt me when you openly judge and criticize the Pope and lead other people to do the same. Think, my children, I spent over 30 years with Jesus. Never once did I abandon him or betray him. And yet Jesus chose Peter to lead the church and not me. Peter had only known Jesus for 3 years, had little education, and had many character faults. Did I go about telling people not to listen to Peter? Did I think that I should have been in his place? Did I openly criticize him and undermine his position? Clearly not, my children, but rather I prayed for him. I loved him, and I trusted that he was chosen by the Holy Spirit in spite of his faults and mistakes. Your Pope, my children, is your Pope, and you must pray for him without judging or criticizing or thinking that you know better. So very many of you, and sadly, so very many of you who are devoted to my rosary, are very harsh and critical of the Pope. It would be better to pray no rosary at all than to pray with a heart full of hatred and pride, treating my rosary as a method of getting your own way. The heart of the rosary, my children, is surrender. Surrender to the ways and will of God, which includes God's choice of Pope. Stop criticizing your Pope immediately and pray and make acts of reparation for the damage that you have already done and teach others to do the same. Pray my rosary for your Pope with a heart of love, compassion and respect, and you will bring immense joy to my motherly heart. What a really beautiful, profound, heartfelt, humble message from Our Lady. And as I was getting this locution, the exciting part at times about getting locutions is I never know what Our Lady is going to talk to me about. And even when she does talk to me, the examples she used, the analogies she used, always makes me smile because it's not something I would have thought of. And it is true. Think, my children, I spent over 30 years with Jesus. And what Our Lady is saying, Our Lady, number one, was born immaculately, without sin. So she had no character faults whatsoever. She was familiar with the ways of the supernatural. Then she had 30 years of rearing Jesus, being with Jesus. None of us can fathom what those 30 years would have been like, how she grew spiritually in those 30 years. And then tradition has it say that she was maybe about 14, 15, 16, somewhere around there when she had Jesus. She was 30 years with Jesus. So now we're talking, Our Lady must have been about 45, 44, 45, somewhere around there when Jesus died on the cross. So imagine she's 45. She's in the ideal position now to lead the church. She's in the ideal position if you go into the bank and you speak to the bank manager might be around 45. 45 is sort of that age that you could be manager, you've had quite a bit of experience, you're still relatively young and stuff like that. And then Our Lady says, and did Jesus choose me, Our Lady, to run the church? No, not at all. Jesus chose Peter to run the church. Peter, who had 3 years of experience following Jesus. He had been a fisherman up to that, not a great education, and many character faults. And we know from the conversations that Peter had with Jesus, we know that he abandoned Jesus 3 times. He denied Jesus. We know he wasn't at the cross. We know he had lots of character faults. And even after the resurrection, we know that there were issues between Peter and Paul. And Paul accused Peter of a certain amount of hypocrisy. And then Peter actually confessed and agreed that he was right. So there was lots of areas, okay? And so Our Lady is saying, did I go about telling people not to listen to Peter? No. Did I think that I should have been in his place? Oh, I should be the Pope. No. Did I openly criticize him and undermine his position? No. Clearly not, my children. But I prayed for him because I loved him and I trusted that he was chosen by God in spite of his faults and mistakes. And this reminds me, at the moment, there's a woman I know, and I'll change it a bit so nobody recognises who I'm talking about, but it's a story about grandchildren. There's a woman I know, and there's grandchildren involved, and one of her children is a bit harsh on one of the grandchildren. And the woman said to me, said, pray, because I know that my daughter is a little bit harsh at times on one of the children. But she didn't say it in a judgmental way, because she knew that the daughter, it's stressful for the daughter, the child is perhaps a little bit difficult. And she said it with so much love. Now, imagine if that mother went up, or the grandmother went up to her daughter and said, you're such a bad mother the way you're treating your child. She couldn't say that because she knows that that's her child and that she has to do her best with that child. And maybe it's only over time that she's going to learn how to handle that child better. In the meantime, the grandmother can pray. Maybe at times the grandmother can offer little pieces of advice. But the grandmother won't be calling social services saying you shouldn't be the mother of that child. We have to get that child removed from social services. I should have that child. Someone else should have that child. The mother did this, the mother did that, the mother said this, the mother said that. Not at all. And yet the grandmother knows that at times the mother is making mistakes. And so it's the same with the Pope. Our Lady isn't saying that the Pope is 100% perfect and makes absolutely no mistakes. But what she is saying is that he is the Pope chosen by God, just the same as Peter was chosen by God. And that it's not in criticizing him. He didn't ask to be made Pope. He didn't ask to be elected Pope. He responded to God's call to becoming a priest. He was chosen to become a bishop, eventually a cardinal, eventually a pope. He has given his whole entire life to serving Jesus as best he can, and now he's 86 years old and he's doing his absolute best to lead the church. And so Our Lady is saying to pray for him. And then she goes on to say that so very many of the people that criticize him are actually people that pray a lot. And it is true at times. Sometimes you can meet people that are very devoted to the rosary, but also they can be very narrow-minded in the way they talk, and they can be extremely critical, and at times they can almost use the rosary as some sort of a weapon that they're going to get their own way. Like, I'm going to pray 5 rosaries and all of a sudden this will happen and that will happen. And Our Lady is saying, we don't pray the rosary with a spirit of willfulness. We pray the rosary with a spirit of surrender. Surrender to the ways of God, surrender to the plans of God, surrender to the love of God for our lives, but also for the lives of others and for the life of the church. And so she's saying part of this surrender is accepting God's will as our Pope as Pope. The heart of my rosary is surrender. Surrender to the ways of God and the will of God, which includes God's choice as Pope. So she says, stop criticizing your Pope immediately and pray. And not only that, make acts of reparation for the damage you've already done. We've heard that example. I have a cushion beside me here, but we've heard the example of your man, and he goes to this wise man. He is about gossip, and the wise man says, well, take a pillow, a feathered pillow, tear it open on a windy day, throw it up in the air, and let all the feathers scatter round. And then he says, now I want you to go and collect up all the feathers over the town. And they say that gossip is the same thing. When you start gossiping about people, talking about people, it spreads like fire. And then afterwards, how do you undo it? Well, the reality is maybe you can't undo all of it. However, you can counteract it. You can counteract it by saying sorry publicly. You can counteract it by saying nice things publicly about the person, and then letting the positive and good news spread like wildfire, just as the bad news spread like wildfire. Also, you can pray for the person, and you can also do reparation and ask Jesus to forgive you for your sin, but the damage you've also done to the community. So eventually she says, pray, my children, for your Pope with a heart of love, compassion, and respect. Notice, when we're praying for someone, imagine, for example, today is my birthday, and you are baking me a cake, right? And if you're my friend, I hope you're not putting arsenic into it. So you're baking that cake with love, and you're thinking, gosh, Michael likes this, or Michael like that, or whoever. And so the same thing, prayer. Prayer is a gift. When we're praying for someone, we're supposed to do it with a heart of love, because we care about them, because we love them. And we're not supposed to be praying for someone because we have to, because we should, or even a sort of a revenge type of a thing, out of anger almost, No. And so Our Lady is saying, pray for your Pope with a heart of love, compassion, and respect, and you will bring immense joy to my motherly heart. And what could be nicer today than bringing immense joy to the motherly heart of Our Lady by praying for our Pope. And also, it's a great way ourselves for growing in humility, because just like when Our Lady was alive and she was praying for St. Peter, of course there were areas where she was more in tune than St. Peter, and yet God hadn't chosen her as Pope, he had chosen Peter. So what a wonderful way we can grow in humility too, to say God has chosen this 86-year-old man as our Pope, who is not perfect, who is representing the Catholic Church, and yet we are asked to love him. And at times he will make mistakes, just maybe like your grandmother or your grandfather makes a mistake, and yet our witness is to be a witness of love. And when other people criticize him, we can say, well, who knows, maybe he made a mistake, whatever, but he's God's choice, he's not perfect. God works in spite of the mistakes. God doesn't choose the perfect, just as he chose Peter, just as he's chosen us. So our witness is to be a witness of love, of hope, of respect, not of criticism, not of pride, and not of slander. And so let us bring great joy to the motherly heart of Our Lady today. My camera is falling a little bit. Let us bring great joy to the motherly heart of Our Lady today by praying for the Pope, doing reparation for any places we have offended Our Lady, and also by encouraging and teaching other people to pray for our Pope as well. So thank you for watching, and spread the good news.